Hi, good morning, friends. It is Sunday, April the 13th, day 84 of the second Trump administration. Now, if you're a cinephile or an AMC Stubbs A-list member, you might have heard of a little film called The Godfather. Donald Trump, a noted thespian who's appeared in films like Home Alone 2 and who basically just appointed himself the new chair of the Kennedy Center, has said that The Godfather is one of his favorite movies of all time. He's also a fan of the sequel, The Godfather Part 2, which he considers a classic. Now, I agree with him on that, by the way. If you've seen the second film, you might be familiar with one of its most famous lines. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Donald Trump seems to have taken that piece of advice from Michael Corleone a little too seriously because it kind of sums up his approach to foreign policy and tariffs so far. I mean, how else do you explain why tariffs on Chinese electronics, like my new iPhone, are gone, and Trump's envoy had his third meeting with Vladimir Putin this week? Or that Trump wants to take over Canada, our biggest trading partner. It's like Trump thinks that we've grown too close to our closest allies, so now he's pushing them away. He also continues to threaten Greenland's sovereignty, a territory that belongs to Denmark, which is one of our NATO allies. And speaking of NATO, one of the defining moments of Trump's second term so far in the last 84 days was when he had that war of words with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office. Trump has long made it known that he thinks the United States has been giving Ukraine too much money for its war against Russia, so it wasn't exactly a shock when he suspended the funding for that country. But on top of that, Donald Trump has called Zelensky, who is a democratically elected president, a, quote, dictator. Just a couple of days ago, Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, General Keith Kellogg, suggested that the United States could divide Ukraine, quote, like Berlin after World War II. These would all be favorable terms for Russia, by the way, which is objectively one of America's top adversaries. Fine, we know he hero worships Putin and even Xi and Kim Jong-un and Hungary's Orban, but it's mind-blowing how Trump has upended America's alliances in such a short amount of time. Most of the changes that this administration has made to both domestic and foreign policy is already damaging America's reputation on the world stage. In Canada, a movement has begun to boycott American products like whiskey and produce as a result of Trump's antagonism. It's even causing Canadians to change their vacation plans. America is the #1 travel destination for Canadians. Tourism Economics, a travel analytics firm, expects travel from Canada to the United States to plummet by 20% this year. Now, keep in mind, most of the travel between Canada and the United States is business travel. So a lot of vacationers are canceling their trips. And that's potentially a loss of billions and billions and billions of dollars for the American economy. It's fueled at least in part by the anger and the fear that people all around the world are feeling as a result of Donald Trump's hardline stances and his crackdown on immigrants, which has already ensnared a number of travelers who've been thrown in detention. His trade war and tariff tantrum, because I hesitate to call whatever he's doing policy, has only made it worse. Even though many of those tariffs, except the ones on China, except the ones on Chinese electronics that he's paused, have demonstrated that this White House is a strategic mess. It's ready to go after everybody, friend or foe alike. It's like the school bully trying to take everybody's lunch money. It's how a lot of people perceive America right now. And the thing about that is that there's one country that is more than eager to swoop in and take advantage of America's declining reputation around the world. And that country is China. It's the world's second largest economy. Due to Trump's tariffs, Chinese President Xi has ordered his officials to focus on building strong relations with its neighbors in Asia. The newspaper People's Daily, which is run by the Communist Party in China, said Xi wants to, quote, open up a new chapter in neighborhood diplomacy, end quote. China's actually gotten the ball rolling on that front. In anticipation of Trump's tariffs, China's trade minister met with his South Korean and Japanese counterparts. South Korea and Japan are American allies strategically, from a trade perspective, economically, and militarily. But he met with those two countries last month, and those three countries have vowed to strengthen their trade ties with one another. China's also making moves to bolster its ties with Europe. Last week, it signed on to a trade agreement with Spain to import more of its pork products. The White House has stated that it wants to upend the global trade order and that will come at a cost. If it's not careful with how it fosters its relationships with our traditional alliances, America could be the one left behind. Joining me now is Ian Bremmer. He's the president and founder of Eurasia Group and G0 Media. He's the host of G0 World with Ian Bremmer. He's the author of many, many books, including The Power of Crisis, How Three Threats and Our Response Will Change the World. And he is an expert on China. Ian, my friend, nice to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Really?
Ian, talk to me about this. It is absolutely clear that there are reasons that we should have a sophisticated approach to China as it relates to economics, as it relates to trade, as it relates to the military. This feels a little unsophisticated right now.
You know, the most bipartisan policy over the last 10 years around the world in the U.S. has been towards China. Democrats, Republicans, Trump administration first time around, and Biden, basically the same approach on issues like Taiwan, on export controls, on key advanced technologies, on trade overall. All of that was pretty much identical until the tit-for-tat, unilaterally to start escalatory approach that we've seen from the U.S. since Liberation Day. And now instead of de-risking towards China, it's actively decoupling. It's also chaos because it's 3 steps forward and 1 step back. Nobody knows really what to expect. We've also cut off all of our high-level direct engagement with the Chinese, a country that there doesn't exist any mutual trust. So it's impossible to get to a better place if you're not actively talking to them. On all of those fronts, I would say we've got some pretty big challenges, and the impact on the economy, both globally as well as for the U.S. and China specifically, is going to be quite dramatic.
Talk to me a little bit about the opportunities that China might see in this. They've got some dangers too. This could hurt China a great deal. But let's talk about the opportunities. I just got back from my second trip to Central Asia in the last year. I got back last week. And these are countries that would like to have less reliance. They learn Russian in school, but everybody speaks English and wants to sort of be Western facing. But China's next door. And China's willing to build high-speed rail and ports for them and for those countries that have water access. China's prepared to do business with these places. And as America continues to shun other countries, does this create an opening for China?
Well, it's not like the opening is new. China already has the largest trade relations with a big majority of countries around the world, including in the Western Hemisphere, Central and South America. The dominant trade partners with all of those countries in America's backyard is not the United States. People need to know that. It is already China. On top of that, the United States has just cut off almost all of the foreign aid that it provides to all of the countries that China has dominant trade relations with. So even before you see these American tariffs against all these countries around the world, they were already ceding a lot of this ground to Beijing. Now, with the Americans unilaterally saying we're not so interested in having your kids come to our universities, we're going to make it tougher in terms of tourism. We're going to be less attractive. And we're certainly not going to be easy in terms of trade. That's basically and America doesn't have a Belt and Road program to compete with Chinese state investment into so many countries around the world. Then, of course, they'd rather do business with an advanced industrial democracy that has rule of law. But if the United States is increasingly not embracing that and has much less certainty to its policies and is willing to beat up friend and foe alike, then, of course, you'll see a lot more hedging towards China. And China does see this not just in terms of improving its relations with a lot of countries around the world, many of which have historically been U.S. allies, but also sees America leaving so much of the multilateral architecture. If the U.S. is saying we're out of the World Health Organization, well, who's then the dominant player that will determine how the WHO runs? Historically, the second largest donor, that would be China. U.S. leaves the Paris Climate Accord. You've got COP summits on global climate. The dominant technology producer at scale globally is China on transition energy and supply chain. They will dominate the climate and sustainability conversations going forward, the Americans will barely have a seat at the table. So on all of those fronts, short-term, China's in very serious trouble because their economy is not doing well and the U.S. is hitting them in the teeth. But long-term, this is the biggest geopolitical opportunity for China that they could possibly imagine.
All right. Well, I want to take a quick break, but when I come back, we have to take a quick break to pay the bills. So I want to talk about paying the bills. When we come back, I want to talk about China's role in money. The U.S. currency, the U.S. Treasuries took a hit last week because people are losing faith in the U.S. dollar. China sees an opportunity there as well. Ian, stay where you are. I want to discuss some developments about Iran after the break as well. I do have some breaking news out of Ukraine right now, according on yesterday, where he led indirect talks with Iran about Tehran's nuclear program. Now, this is the first set of talks since
far weaker position in the region than they were back in the Obama term or the Trump term. They have lost pretty much all of their major proxies across the region. Hezbollah has been blown up. Hamas, of course, is pretty much gone. And the Americans are hitting the Houthis really hard under the Trump administration. Houthis now saying, if you're willing to stop, we're willing to stop harassing traffic. So in the region, this has been a win for the United States, for Israel and its allies. The Iranians understand that they no longer have the ability to use project power across the region and hit the people that they don't like. And so as a consequence, they understand that Israel is preparing to hit them militarily and potentially with support of the United States if they don't actually come to a better and broader deal. And yes, that deal would involve something that looked like the old Iranian nuclear deal on their nuclear program development, the JCPOA, but it would also include restrictions on their ballistic missile capabilities. It would also include restrictions on stopping their support for these proxies around the region. So it wouldn't be a bigger deal, particularly on the nukes, but it would be a broader deal in terms of what it covered. And in that regard, these developments in Oman over the last 24 hours are something that everyone should be welcoming.
All right, I want to ask you about something else. There's been a lot of stuff going on between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine says that there are at least 150 Chinese soldiers in Russia fighting on behalf of Russia. Do we know who these people are and what this means? Is China finally putting its thumb on the scale in favor of Russia? Because that could change the balance of that war.
There's no reason to believe that. Ukraine has not said that they have any evidence that the Chinese government is supporting this. We have evidence that U.S. soldiers, that U.S. mercenaries, U.S. citizens have been fighting on the ground for Ukraine over the last 3 years. Certainly, they've not gone at the direction of the U.S. government or NATO. Unlike North Korea, where people are not allowed to get out if they want to, China is not totalitarian. It is an authoritarian regime. I suspect what we're seeing is the Russians are spending a lot more money on soldiers. And they've had mercenaries that they've taken from Central Asia, from Bangladesh. There have been some cases of people that have been brought over and didn't exactly know what they were doing until they got there. Then they were upset when they were fighting in the war. Wouldn't surprise me if that's what we're looking at here. China's a pretty big country, Ali.
Ian, good to see you. Thank you, as always. Ian Bremmer is the president and founder of the Eurasia Group and of G0 Media. He's the author of multiple important books, including The Power of Crisis, How Three Threats and Our Response Will Change the World. But again, like so many people we have on this show, it's worth going back into the bibliography and taking a look at some of the things that Ian's written. They become very, very relevant again. Okay, up next, there is a time and a place for a tariff that can be very effective when used deliberately, like when President Joe Biden put tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Electric vehicles, EV is what we call them. That's the short form, in the same way that AI stands for artificial intelligence, not A1, as in A1 steak sauce. But somebody needs to get that memo to the Education Secretary, Linda McMahon. We have some breaking news from the White House this hour. The results of Donald Trump's annual physical exam have just been released. According to the White House physician, quote, President Trump remains in excellent health, exhibiting robust cardiac, pulmonary, neurological, and general physical function. His active lifestyle continues to contribute significantly to his well-being. President Trump's days include participation in multiple meetings, public appearances, press availability, frequent victories in golf events. President Trump exhibits excellent cognitive and physical health and is fully fit to execute the duties of the commander-in-chief and the head of state. End quote. Woman, man, person, TV. What was the last one? Can't remember. Camera. All right, just let that sink in for a minute during a commercial break. I'll be right back.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff, and it's my favorite word. The word tariff is the most beautiful word in the dictionary, more beautiful than love, more beautiful than respect. To me, the most beautiful word, and I've said this for the last couple of weeks, in the dictionary today, is the word tariff. I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary.
He's got a weird dictionary. The President of the United States gushing over the thing he used to upend the global economy like it's today's Wordle. The truth is, tariffs are neither a beautiful nor an ugly word. Tariffs are a tool, incredibly useful in some cases, not so useful, potentially damaging in others. And as a tool, like a hammer, for instance, which is great for hitting a nail, not so good for unclogging your toilet. No matter how badly you want to fix up your house, you can't just use a hammer. Now, both parties have used tariffs to achieve their policy goals. Let's use an example from the Biden administration. Last summer, Joe Biden stamped a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs, electric vehicles. That's because China has, we have to admit, some fantastic cheap electric vehicle options that could take over our entire EV market, Elon Musk, if some barriers were not erected. Like the Chinese-made BYD Seagull. I was just in Central Asia. I saw a ton of these. They cost less than $10,000. Even with the tariff that Biden wanted to add, the Seagull would still be less expensive than the least expensive American-made electric vehicle. So the Biden administration wanted more people to drive electric vehicles for the environment, but they wanted them driving American-built EVs. Before slapping on the 100% EV tariff, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, which provided funding for electric vehicle production in the United States. These tariffs stop the flow of a competitive product from entering the U.S. market, and the government subsidies for EV production plants and charging stations get paid out to American companies to build that infrastructure. Whether you like it or not, that's actually how you move industry back to America. The tariffs, coupled with the investments into American production, go hand in hand, protecting the American industry and allowing it to grow. Regardless of your opinion on free trade, or on electric vehicles and where they should be made, or on China, this is a tariff that had a specific use, paired with a policy that was meant to uplift a specific industry and create specific jobs in America. You may not agree with it, but it was strategic. Or you could apply a one-size-fits-all equation to every country on Earth, as Donald Trump did, and as a result, levy a 50% tariff on this country, Lesotho. It's a landlocked country in southern Africa, surrounded entirely by South Africa. No ports, no lakes, no rivers. No, they got some rivers, but no ocean. And that's what the White House did before President Trump put a 90-day pause on most planned tariffs. So why was Lesotho hit with a 50% tariff? Well, two words: bad math. The White House developed an equation to calculate our trade deficit with each country, and it came up with an individual tariff rate for each country based on that equation. The U.S. imports only $240 million worth of goods from Lesotho. Not much compared to our major trading partners, but it doesn't buy much from us. Lesotho doesn't buy much from America either, which explains how Trump landed on the 50% number. I'm going to get into trade deficits later in the show. It's a different topic. But let's talk about Lesotho here. Lesotho has a thriving garment industry we import from. Chinese factories that make Levi's and Wrangler products make denim in the country. These are not jobs we actually need or want back in America. Garments make up 20% of Lesotho's GDP. They also have some diamonds that they sell us. So why doesn't the government sell, the U.S. government, or why doesn't the U.S. sell more stuff to Lesotho? Because people who live in Lesotho can't really afford to buy American goods at American prices. The per capita GDP of Lesotho is under $1,000, making it one of the poorest countries on the planet. They are never going to buy as much from us as we are going to sell to them. Lesotho's leaders, or as they are going to sell to us. Lesotho's leaders are among the dozen who contacted the White House to make a new deal in the lead up to the president issuing a 90-day pause on these tariffs. Despite the economic reality, they are in fact willing to purchase more stuff from America. They're willing to purchase American medical equipment and some military supplies to appease the White House. That's according to a memo that was obtained by Mother Jones. Now, just how they're actually going to do that, I'm not entirely sure. There's also a chance they might do what Ian Bremmer just talked about. They might simply look in another direction. China eliminated duties on imports from Lesotho and 33 other African countries last year. I'm only using Lesotho because it's a standout example, but there are dozens of these around the world.
The baker and the handyman's sweet connection. In a quaint village nestled in a picturesque valley, there stood a small house in the shape of a mushroom. This whimsical home belonged to a young boy named Jamie, barely out of high school, who had a passion for baking. Inside, his cozy kitchen was always filled with the sweet aroma of cakes, cookies, and all sorts of delightful treats. What made his creation special was that each of his cakes was shaped like tiny mushrooms, a nod to his quirky home. Jamie's baking became the talk of the town. From birthdays to celebrations, everyone in the village adored his sweets.
For more, click link in the bio.
Sable's Song, A Siren's Journey to Joy. Once upon a time, in a small, worn-out town in Middle America, there lived a little child named Sable. Worn into poverty, Sable's body was frail, so thin that you could see her bones, but her heart was filled with an exuberance that not even hunger could dull. Sable was awkward, with dark, deep-set eyes that sparkled with innocence and wonder. Despite being born a boy, Sable always knew she was different. Inside her lived a girl, bright and effervescent, waiting to bloom.
For more, click tree link in profile.
The Future, Daughters of Liberty, A New Dawn. In 2040, the United States was a fractured nation, still reeling from the fallout of Project 2025. The catastrophic policy that had allowed a resurgence of systemic oppression. The Deep South had seceded once more, forming the antebellum republic, where human trafficking, racial inequality, and gender oppression became tragically normalized. The Second Civil War erupted as the rest of the nation sought to free those trapped in this dystopian regime. After years of bloodshed, Kamala Harris had finally led the Union to victory, restoring a fragile sense of hope. But the battle scars ran deep, especially in places like Louisiana, where the remnants of a broken society still lingered.
For more, click tree link in bio.
The Park of Secrets.
In the year 2060, near the heart of Florida, just a stone's throw from Disney World, stood a theme park unlike any other, a place known as the House of Secrets. It was a magical park, much like a state fair, filled with towering rides, carnival games, and parades that drew people from all over the world. But among the grand Ferris wheel and the colorful day parade, there was one attraction that outshined them all, the Parade Princess, a mesmerizing mermaid named Kenya. Kenya was a sight to behold. At 22 years old, fresh out of college, she had the kind of beauty that drew people to her like moths to a flame. Her brown skin glowed under the park lights, her hair a stunning mix of purple and pink that cascaded over her shoulders. Little pink hearts adorned her cheeks, and a ribbon of color stretched across her nose. But it wasn't just her beauty that made her special. Her eyes, big and almond-shaped, seemed to capture the hearts of everyone who saw her. A dying planet, the last harvest.
In the year 2060, Earth is a shadow of its former self, choked by pollution, endless concrete, and abandoned by nature. Only a small fishing village by the sea has managed to preserve the planet's last untouched forest. In this dying world, June and Win, two young girls and the last children in their village, cling to the remnants of hope and innocence. Win roams the forest, collecting the season's last harvest, while June sings songs that echo with a haunting beauty through the village.
For more, click Linktree in profile.
I told you. What did I tell you? Didn't I tell you? 'Cause I told you. And when did I tell you? A long time ago. And what did I say will happen when I told you? Exactly what just happened.